All right, I'm going to pass it to our program director, Mr. Craig Watts, and he's going to give us an overview. So feel free to take it away.
Well, I just want to welcome everybody, and I just want to get everybody from our team to introduce themselves. So, Hannah, I'm going to let you start with the introduction yourself, and you just popcorn it around. How's that?
Yeah, that's so funny. Okay. Hey, everyone. I forgot to introduce myself, but I am Hannah Escada. I am the communications director, and I am working with the Growers Unite team. So you may see me as the name posting some of our content on our Facebook page. I'm not the expert here. I'm just here to coordinate things and make it run smoothly. The rest of the folks speaking today are the real experts, so I'll let them take it away.
Susie, you're on mute, bud.
I'm Susie Critchfield, and I'm from Arkansas. I was a grower for 25 years for Tyson Foods, and I joined the SRAP team back in 2021, and I will be telling a part of my story tonight. Thank you, Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael Diaz. Also a former contract poultry grower. Turned to advocacy work back in 2021 as well. Left the industry after working with three different integrators and looking forward to talking about these rules tonight. Patty?
Hey everybody, I'm Patty Lavera. I work for a coalition called Campaign for Family Farms and the Environment, and we do a lot of coordinating with SRAP. And so I'm going to talk tonight about kind of what's happening in DC, which is where I'm based.
Thank you, Patty. My name is Craig Watts, and I am the program director of the Contract Grower Transition Program for the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project. Growers Unite is a thing that we do. It's a Facebook page, and we have our own website now where people can go and look at resources. I'm a former contract poultry grower as well. Raised birds for two different integrators for 23 and a half years. So that's me in a nutshell. So why are we here today? Last month, the USDA announced that it was planning to rescind three rules that strengthened protections for poultry farmers under the Packers and Stockyards Act. Now, it's no secret that there's this imbalance of power that exists between the farmers and the poultry companies that they contract with. Now, the rules were intended to give farmers a little more power by requiring these companies to provide more details on payment structures, to make ranking systems more fair, to avoid discrimination and retaliation against growers. The plan to rescind these rules is being submitted to the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, but I'll let Patty talk about that a little bit later. The rules were just recently finalized under the last administration under Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. They finalized three major Packers and Stockyards Act rules. Number one, transparency in poultry grower contracting and tournaments. Number two, inclusive competition and market integrity under the Packers and Stockyards Act. And number three, poultry grower payment systems and capital improvement systems. The knock I'm hearing in DC, oh, these were Biden era rules. These were not Biden era rules. They just crossed the goal line during the Biden eras. These rules are a result of decades of farm group advocacy and farmers going to DC, and we have seen multiple proposals and rollbacks during the Obama administration, during the first Trump administration, and it's like three steps forward, three steps back. If these rules are rescinded, they will shift more power back to the large companies that already dictate most of the prices and conditions. So I talked about the history of the rules and I went back to the Obama administration. It actually goes back much further than that. The first shot across the bow that I'm aware of was a lady named Mary Klaus, and this is in 1985. So this is Reagan. She was a breeder grower from here in North Carolina, and she walked into the offices of the Rural Advancement Foundation International in Pittsboro, North Carolina, which is a farm advocacy group here in North Carolina. And so Mary started decades of advocacy work on behalf of farmers. And as a result of her work in the 90s, I started in 1992, we saw strong associations get formed. Here in North Carolina, we had enough members in our state association to where we actually had county chapters with elected officials. Now, for various reasons, the organization just kind of faded away. And I would say by the mid 2000s, they were pretty much a done deal, except for the folks for the contract growers, poultry growers, the contract poultry growers of the Virginias and the Alabama Contract Poultry Growers Association. They're both still going, so kudos to those guys. Um, I guess around 2008, we saw our first big congressional push to help the poultry growers out. They mandated that the USDA address some issues regarding what they were hearing around livestock and poultry. So as a result of the 2008 Farm Bill was the infamous 2010 GIPSA rule, if some of y'all are around then. If not, by all means, Google it. It basically was something that we farmers and a few of the organizations together, we just basically made a wish list, and they basically took it off our paper and put it on their paper, and it contained substantial proposed protections for poultry growers and rules concerning the tournament payment, suspension of bird deliveries. If you ever had that flock that settled and you get that visit between the flocks and they say, well, you got to do this XYZ before we bring you another flock back, that was designed to mitigate some of that. Capital investments, which are upgrades, contract breaches. And we did get the option to opt out of mandatory arbitration. And there were some other things too. But the companies got the Congress to extend the comment period, and that allowed time for them to really apply pressure to the lawmakers and the decision makers. So Congress kind of intervened again, probably not a good way this time. 2011, the final rule did retain a number of the grower protections, but it was modified and it was really in bare bones form. So things that survived with the 90-day termination of contract, the additional capital disclosure, that black line you see in your contracts now that say we may require you to spend a lot of money. That came out of that. What else? Of course, the mandatory arbitration. You can look up growers' rights and poultry grower arrangements, and that'll give you the complete list of protections. So there was also some appropriation sleight of hand. Appropriation sleight of hand mean money. That affected what survived in the rule, but that's a bit wonky, and I'm just going to leave that right there. Under VILSAC 2.0, there became a renewed interest in reviving some of the protections to once again to try to deal with this imbalance of power in the relationships. So in February 2024, transparency in poultry growing contracts and tournaments became effective. In May of 2024, inclusive competition and market integrity under the Packers and Stockyards Act became effective. And in January 2025, Poultry Grower Systems and Capital Improvement Systems was published, but has since been delayed until December of 2027. So I'm going to have a slight breach of chronological order etiquette here, and I'm going to jump right into the second rule, which is inclusive competition and market integrity rule. Now, this rule tackles three things for farmers and ranchers dealing with this imbalance of power with powerful integrators and companies: retaliation, deception, and discrimination. Since this covers a broader spectrum of farmers than just poultry farmers, and Patty deals with a much broader spectrum of farmers, I'm going to let her kind of jump in and tell what this rule is, why it's important, and then there's also a lawsuit around this rule. I'll let her talk about that too. So, floor is yours, Patty.
Okay. Yeah, so people might know this, but just in case. So the Packers and Stockyards Act, the law is really old. It's 100 years old, 100 plus. It was passed in 1921. And there's been a struggle kind of in modern times to get enforcement of what the law says, which is that the buyers of livestock or chicken or poultry should not be able to do some unfair practices in that transaction, right? Which with the producer who is selling them that livestock or poultry. So, or in the case of poultry in these contract growing arrangements. And so the law has been on the books the whole time. The struggle has been to get enforcement. And so there's two ways enforcement can happen. The government can go out and say, the USDA might identify the case, they might do it themselves, they might work with the Department of Justice, but go out and say, hey, company X, Y, or Z, you did this, it's in violation of the Packers and Stockyards Act, and we are going to pursue that enforcement action against you. But there's also a private right of action, which is that an individual person can say, I had this experience, and that violates the Packers and Stockyards Act. So in the 70s, 80s, 90s, people were trying that. And they would sometimes win a case kind of at the first level, and then the companies would always appeal, and it started to fall apart. in the at the appeals court level due to kind of like industry education of those judges and a lot of confusion about what the law really said. And so that led to this whole conversation and activism that led us to 2008. The Farm Bill said, hey, USDA, if you're confused about what these words in the law that are not allowed, if you're confused about what those words mean, write some rules, write some regulations, which is like the roadmap for a federal agency to say what it means for a company, for the buyer of that animal to be deceptive, retaliatory, or discriminatory. And so that's what this one piece of the rules, like they broke all the work to do into different rules. And so this second rule defines those terms. And it applies not just to contract poultry growing, which the other two rules we're going to talk about in a second are very focused on that, integrator contractor relationship. This second rule was about these words that they're not supposed to do practices that are deceptive, retaliatory, or discriminatory. And so that's what the regulation does. That's what the final rule says. It says this is what you cannot do. You cannot retaliate against someone who complains to their member of Congress, associates with other types of livestock producers. Like it gives examples of what is not allowed. You cannot discriminate against someone because of, their origin or religion or et cetera. And it says this is what discrimination would be. So it's supposed to be laying out a clearer path to eliminate this supposed confusion about that prevented enforcement from happening. So that, shouldn't have been this hard, shouldn't have taken this long, but this rule got across the finish line. The industry did not like it. Several pieces of the industry, different associations filed a lawsuit in Texas. That was a very deliberate choice of venue. They filed a lawsuit in Texas to say, this rule was done improperly. You should throw it out. And all of this was happening as we were changing from the Biden administration into the Trump administration. And it got very convoluted in that case in the court. And basically the judge kind of paused it and said, hey, USDA, figure out what you're doing. And the answer many, many, many months later after that pause essentially was USDA saying, well, we're going to take another look at this rule in general. So we don't know how to defend it from this industry, lawsuit saying it should go away because we might take it away ourselves. So it kind of just put a very permanent pause on that industry challenge because USDA kind of raised their hand and said we might just withdraw it anyway. And shortly after that is when we got this first indication that they plan to withdraw these three rules. So we'll talk more, at the end about some of the DC stuff, but this is like the latest round of a very long battle where the industry does not want to change their business practices and they see enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards Act as a threat to those practices that they've really built their business model on. And so they've done different things at different times. And this is just the latest round of them seeing, trying to clarify and really make clear what enforcement of this law looks like. They're really, really, really motivated to fight that. So I'll just stop there. Does that cover everything you need, Craig?
I think so. Just to add on that a little bit, like I said, she mentioned the things, retaliation, discrimination, and deception. There's a whole list of activities that farmers and ranchers have a right to engage in without the fear of retaliation. And I know in poultry specifically, we hear it all the time that the fear of retaliation is very real in between the farmers and the contractors. So this law would make it clear that the integrator cannot refuse to renew your contract on some whim, like you submitted a complaint to GIPSA or well, I know folks that have gone to DC and testified and come back and mysteriously lost their contracts. That's happened. That's a fact. And discrimination is pretty, I would say, pretty self-explanatory. Just you can't discriminate against farmers and ranchers because of race or gender or marital status or religion or whatever. And then deception, it just prohibits integrators from making false or misleading statements or leaving out like important information when contracting with farmers and ranchers. I think we're in a sad state where you have to put retaliation in. You can't retaliate against a farmer for going and speaking to a regulated entity in a regulation, but here we are. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. We have some actually not we don't. The USDA has some fact sheets around these rules, and we'll be posting these later. So I won't get into the every listing of what would constitute retaliation. You can pull up the fact sheet and check that out yourself. So we're going to go back in time a little bit and go back to in right chronological order, and and I'm gonna let Michael talk about transparency in poultry growing contracts and tournaments. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Craig. I'm going to start by saying anybody that has grown chickens knows that these rules are long overdue. Um, Organizations like SRAP, dedicated farmers, like some of the people that are on this call, people that are going to be listening to this and recording, they've been advocating for these provisions for years. All right, so I'm going to ask. Here's an ask, which is farmers are very protective. So I am going to say that let me ask to stand together, keep the full court press on, and make sure that these rules do stand. Transparency in poultry grower contracting and tournaments. The three of us here that are talking, were former growers, and I think we would all agree that the word transparent was foul language as far as the industry was concerned when I signed my contract. Um, to be clear, there are about four things that I want to highlight that transparency is addressing. It's contract disclosures, minimum commitments, litigation history, and tournament system insights. The USDA explains it like this: the rule forces integrators to unmask their books, give transparent financial and operational realities, and here's the key word, before a farmer signs a contract or takes out a loan for equipment. Some mandatory disclosure documents would look like what are the earning breakdowns? And I'm not talking about some fabricated earning breakdown. We're talking about real historical earnings of local growers that are growing out of that complex so farmers can see actual income variations. Um, Something else would be like, what's the company's turnover rates, the average annual turnover rate of growings working with that company over the last 5 years? Bankruptcy, are there any bankruptcy? Are there any litigation that the company has been in? For instance, disputes with other growers. This was a big one for me, and gosh, I know it's going to resonate with some of the farmers that are listening in. Farm sale policies. I know we've all been caught up in and heard about the traps that these farmers get themselves into when they are trying to sell their farm. There needs to be clear upfront terms detailing what happens to the contract if the farmer decides to sell their land or facilities. I've heard things like companies trying to say, well, wait a minute, we need to make sure if who's signing a contract or who's making an offer to purchase your farm is a quote unquote good fit. Um, things like minimum volume and density guarantees. This is a strong way to put this, but integrators can no longer financially starve out farmers by withholding birds. There needs to be flock placement minimums. There needs to be minimum stocking density that needs to be disclosed before you sign your contract. They are going to de-escalate the tournament system. Um, there should be transparency on the inputs, so that when you wind up settling on these flocks and you're looking at your settlement statements, that you can see whether or not the playing field was fair when you're settling out with a group of other growers. This was a huge one for me, expansion. payment and capital improvement safeguards. I always used to say that I hated when I felt like I lost control of my checkbook. I know farmers out there can relate to that when they have these demands for upgrades on their facilities. Um, what am I trying to say? Sometimes these upgrades, you're sitting there wondering, okay, is this a requirement? Is this a necessity? How is this going to input my bottom line as a farmer? So there needs to be rigorous financial justification and concrete info. Again, I'm going to highlight that word before an integrator can expect you to absorb an expense for any type of upgrade. So in closing, I'm going to say again, I hope that all of us can agree, especially the farmers that are listening in, to stand strong, stand together, because it is paramount that these rules do not get rescinded. And this is just a small step in the right direction. Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And the thing is the data he's talking about that they're having to supply the growers. I mean, this data exists. They already have it. It's not going to be a heavy lift for the integrators. Now, I think that's interesting that they were restricting the sale to see if the potential farmer was a good fit. The qualification I had is, can you get the money? And then they didn't care if I was a good fit or not, as long as I could get the money. So that interesting to hear that. So I'm going to turn it over to Susie Crutchfield now, who's going to explain a little bit about the poultry grower systems and capital improvement systems rule that was published in January of 2025, but it has been delayed until December 2027, assuming they don't rescind it completely. Take it away, Susie.
Thank you, Craig. I would like again, tournament system and the capital investments. These became a real problem for me in 2012 when they used the tournament system against me to try to make me do $300,000 worth of upgrades on some old houses some for older houses and my new houses that really didn't need any upgrades. And the problem with this tournament pay system is the integrator tournament system can create the impression that every grower's bird should perform with the precision and consistency of manufacturing parts produced by a CNC machine with tolerances less than thousandths of inches. Broiler chickens are not manufactured components, but the tournament system is set up that way. They are living animals, and their performance they perform naturally varies from flock to flock. Factories outside the grower's reasonable control can affect final results. Genetics, chicken quality, chicken placement, feed quality, feed delivery, disease, stock density, mortality, medication, and the time that your process is scheduled. The tournament pay system may make a grower pay depending upon not only how well that grower performed, but how other growers perform under potential different circumstances, comparing growers as though they operated under identical conditions. And we all know that there's no two houses alike, even if you own more than one house. Every house acts different. And so this tournament system pay leaves you no control over what you get. And also it makes expected income difficult to predict. It also makes contracts difficult to compare. And it shifts the control and by the integrator onto the grower. It gives the integrator substantial control over the variables that ultimately affects the grower's compensation. It makes it difficult to determine whether poor compensation results from the grower's performance or from the factors outside the grower's control. A tournament system can also create opportunities for favoritism. If management has discretion over important production inputs, if management can influence which growers receive better chicks, better service, better timing, and other advantages, then the compensation system may reward or penalize a grower based upon the decisions made by the management. This creates a conflict of interest. Management should not have control over inputs that determine a grower's ranking while using that ranking to determine the grower's compensation. Capital investment is another major concern. The same problem arises when the integrator requires a grower to make expensive improvements. Before requiring major investments, the grower should be able to determine why the investment is necessary, who benefits from the investment, what the expected improvements in production or income would be, how the investment will affect the grower's pay, how the grower can expect to recover his investment, what happens if the contract is terminated, whether the grower will have the opportunity to gain his return on investment, whether the integrator can require another investment before the first investment has reasonably recovered. And the risks are, if the integrator controls the chicks, the genetic feed, the medication process and scheduling, and many other critical production inputs, the grower should not automatically bear the financial consequences when those factors are affecting production results. A biological production system should not be represented to a grower as though it operates with the precision of a manufactured product. The compensation system should recognize and account for the unavoidable biology operational differences between raising of animals. The problem is simple. Broiler chickens are live animals, not identical manufactured products. This compensation system that treats biological products as though if it were a precision manufacturing process risk assessing financial responsibility to growers for the outcome of caused by the integrator. When the integrator controls many of the critical inputs while the grower carries the majority of the fixed infrastructure cost and substantial financial risk, then the compensation system deserves careful scrutiny. The question is whether is this ranking system fair, accurate measure of a grower's performance when conditions affecting products are fully controlled by the grower. The party that controls the risk should not automatically transfer the risk to the party with the least control over it. This reason is why this rule should not be rescinded. These are some of the practices that was used against me in 2012. Please call your congressmen, senators, and help us keep this rule in place. Craig?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Susie. I think if, the way the tournament system is presented, that, if you work harder, you work smarter, that you should get rewarded more. And I don't think there's anybody in this group that would disagree with that. But the problem is as Susie mentioned, uh, there's like five words that kind of negate that, and it's all inputs are not equal. If it was truly an evaluation of the management, okay, but it's just not so. You can't logistically hatch out 2 million chicks a week and they all have the same genetic potential. Even grain varies, like the caloric, rating or whatever of it, just depending on, where you got that bushel of corn from. And I think, and of course, you growers know this, but maybe the folks who aren't growers don't know this, is the difference between good grower and bad grower is measured in hundredths of a cent a pound. Hundredths of a cent a pound. And and they say that, and the integrators will tell you that they know that the inputs aren't equal, so they randomize them. So okay, you're randomizing our paychecks then. So I don't know many jobs you would hang around for to get a randomized paycheck. But I want to go back what the rule actually says. It requires the dealers to set a minimum base price, no more robbing Peter to pay Paul. If that contract is 5 cents a pound, you will not fall below 5 cents a pound. I mean, we've seen square footage arrangements with not market bonuses, but like mini tournaments that set up an opportunity for bonuses. Lots of hybrids like that, but I think the Costco contract was the first one I saw that had a firm base, and they're making it so it's the sky's not falling. Um, you want to be able to disclose details when asking a grower to spend all this money in improvements to their facilities. I mean, if there's not economic justification, then sometimes less is more. So I'll just leave that there and go on to shift quickly over to Patty again and talk about a little bit what exactly happened in DC. Patty, what's happening? Why is this critical, and what you know and what you don't know.
Great. Yeah, just one kind of context history point on the tournament piece in particular is what was in that rule, the rule that now, the third rule about, the tournament payment systems and capital improvements. All three of these rules had public comment periods. The industry had just as much say as we did. They participated in the public comment period just like contract growers and advocates did. And this is where we landed using the process we use to write regulations. So they had their shot to make their points. The rest of the public had their shot to make their points. And ironically, the Biden administration's Department of Justice actually pursued a case against some of the large chicken companies for the way they were treating their contract growers and came to a settlement, which is, and I've not heard any differently, is still in effect for that company that basically sets up the practices that are in this rule that USDA wants to rescind, which is basically saying you can have a base price, like you can get a premium, but there is a fixed base price. And before this concept of the regulation requiring that, people could go below a base, like so somebody's premium was taken at the expense of somebody else and they dipped below that bottom point. And what this DOJ settlement did, and then what the rule would have done was set that floor, and then you could have premiums above that, but you could at least have some predictability of that base. And you could say, I see what you're doing with, who you grouped me with, what you've done. It gave people some rights to say, you have put me in this competition for how I'm going to get paid in a way that is not fair, and I can show you why. It gave some procedures for folks to do that. That's it. It didn't get rid of the tournament system. It didn't, do many more things that many of us proposed, actually, that we would have preferred to go further, right? So it just shows some kind of like the context, I think, is important for what we're hearing from industry versus the reality of what these rules would do when we can finally get them across the finish line. So like I mentioned earlier, this is an old law. In, the last 40, 50 years, there's been a real struggle / lack of willingness to enforce it. And so we have tried all these different things through this regulatory arena to get enforcement of the law on the books, which is quite strong. So, I mentioned, and Craig mentioned, there was a shot at it in the Obama administration. So Congress said, hey, USDA, do this, write these rules. A huge production, lots and lots of public input. They bundled everything into one rule. And then the industry went to Congress year after year after year and said, and when they gave them their annual budget, said, you will spend $0 to finish this. So for multiple years in a row, they did very tricky maneuvers in the appropriations process to say, we're not going to finish these rules. I mentioned this just to show that, like, there's a lot of resilience in the movement of advocates and contract growers and allies in other livestock markets who want enforcement of the Packers and Stockyards Act, and that we have to keep kind of shifting where we fight because the industry shifts where they're fighting. So after year of those rules being paused by the industry pressuring Congress, we literally changed when the TV show, John Oliver's show on HBO, did a 15-minute story on this fight and how unfair these contracts are, that no other part of the economy would allow a contract that looks like a poultry contract, and what was happening in Congress and to whose benefit, these chicken companies. And the next time we went through that budget cycle, USDA was allowed to finish the rules. It changed overnight because of that public awareness of how much unfairness was baked into the system. So but we do all this, we make policy in a political environment. It was very late at the end of the Obama administration when things started to move again. So they tried to kind of get the big package across the finish line and essentially didn't make it. So in the first Trump administration, they pulled it back. They did kind of didn't do much replacement. And then we were essentially trying again when the Biden administration came in. And the whole time, people had been educating the public, educating their elected officials about the unfairness that's been baked into this system and why we need enforcement of this law. So we have the package we had ideas for about 5 different rules. We got 3 of them across the finish line with public comment periods, proposed rules, more comment periods. Like a lot of work was done by USDA and the public, including the industry, to weigh in on what those rules would be. Three of them got across the finish line before the end of the Biden administration. And so we've been fighting ever since the Trump administration came in, because the general vibe of this administration is deregulation. We know that. They brag about it. It's a priority. And we know we have an unhappy industry. And so we've been on ready for defense the whole time. And now it's starting to become clear about like the shape that it's going to take. So I mentioned, like, and Craig mentioned, there was a particular legal attack on one rule, the second rule on inclusive methods of competition that defined, what is deception, what is retaliation, what is discrimination. They specifically went to court to try to stop that. And that kind of just fizzled out because in the meantime, USDA has raised their hand and said, we have a plan to roll back these three rules. That is still where we are. We are still at the plan stage. There's a lot of jargon about how they do that, but essentially USDA has published a work plan for the next 6 months. And on that work plan, it says we are going to withdraw these three rules. They are not withdrawn yet. So we have had some reporting out there about like the rules are dead and the rules are under attack. Like they are, we need to step up and protect them, but they are not dead yet. So that is why, we're trying to spread the word, get people ready so that when we see movement, the USDA will have to do some steps to pull these rules off the books. And so we need to get ready now for when they start to take those steps. So we're always looking. We're watching all the places where they have to post what they're up to, but we expect them to post essentially a proposed rule that says, here's our proposal. We roll the rules back, and that proposed rule should have a public comment period, and that is where you all come in. So we've told them 1,000 times. We've been telling them for 30 years, right? What they need to do, we're gonna have to tell them again. So, like kind of the field of play in this, if this does eventually go a more legal route, which maybe it will, the field of play is the last comment period. It's not the comment period from 2008 or 2010 or 2019 or 2022. It's what we said last time. So when we get to the point, which could be any time now, and there's public comment periods about their idea of rolling the rules back, we all need to be putting in again the comments that say, this is my experience as a contract grower. This happens. This is unfair. This is rigged. And I liked the idea of a rule that did this, this, and this, and you should keep it. And you should move up the effective date. So if that is your opinion, if that is your experience, we need that in there again, even if you've done it before. So that I can't tell you when. They haven't told us when. So we're kind of on alert and we're getting ready. And when that comment period opens, we will tell you many times that it's time for you to weigh in and put your stuff in there. We are well aware for contract growers that there are risks involved in doing that. And folks, Craig and others can talk to you about the best way to handle that. Some people put a comment in anonymously. Some people might sign something that a group of people do. We can talk through that because we know it's real, the risk of retaliation, which is exactly what we're talking about with these rules, right? The other thing I'll mention, and then I can pause and see if people have questions, is we're not just waiting. Congress should have a role in this. They have had a role in this historically. So we are doing as much as we can to talk to members of Congress to directly do something. And we'll see. This Congress has a little bit of a struggle passing laws because they're busy fighting with each other. But if they pass the law, maybe the law could say something about this. Like we will see what we can do there. No promises, but we are raising that issue. And then the other thing that they can do indirectly is tell USDA not to do this, right? They could say, hey, don't blow it. Let these rules go into effect. And we've already had a little bit, we grasp onto little things that we see. But earlier this summer, the Secretary of Agriculture was talking to a committee in the Senate. And we had a senator be like, what's up with these rules? People like these rules. Why would you rescind these rules? And instead of doubling down and being proud of it, she was like, we need to look into that. Because if you're paying any attention to today's USDA and what their messaging is all about consolidation and how we have a couple powerful companies that are running everything, right? They often do it in the conversation about beef, but they're doing it generally about agriculture and livestock and poultry. So anything we can be doing in talking to our elected officials, talking to anybody in your community to make the point of like, you can't say this, that you're tackling consolidation and then turn around and rescind these rules that would actually start to level the playing field in this very consolidated industry. So we're going to do all the things we can think of. So if folks have, in the next couple of weeks, they think they're going to see an elected official, mention this. And they may not know the finer points. So just be like, I need enforcement of this law. These rules are supposed to get into effect. You should make sure that they do. They would help me. And stay tuned and stay in touch with groups like the Network for Growers so that when it does start, if they do start this bad idea of rolling the rules back, we will let you know so that like once again, we can get in there and make the case. We do not want them to be able to say, nobody loved these rules. Nobody wanted them. Nobody cares that we're rolling them back. Like we have to show in that comment period that we do and that people asked for these rules, fought hard to get them, and need them to go into effect. So it might feel like Groundhog Day. Sometimes it does on this particular issue, but we're going to have to do it again. So I think stay in touch and stay tuned for when we know it's time to do that. Anything else we need to cover, Craig?
Beautiful. Thank you, Patty. I just sitting here thinking I've been in this game so long that when I started, my hair was jet black. Here's that. I just a couple more things to clear up about the tournament system rule that Susie was talking about is the misconceptions. I hear it all the time that the companies are telling their farmers that everybody's going to be paid the same. That's just not true. There's nothing preventing these companies from paying a bonus. You just can't subtract from that base pay. But they're very good at coming in with the good grower, bad grower. You don't want these bad growers making what you're making, do you? And you're thinking, they think I'm a good grower. No, I don't want those bad growers making what I'm making. And it's just not true. That they can pay a bonus. And the interesting thing, you talked about that case with the DOJ on that company, and you can go back a little bit further, is the antitrust settlements that these companies a lot of these farmers on here now, they've been receiving checks, right? Because the market is concentrated bad enough as it is, but now they were collaborating to where there was no competition for farmer services. So if we ever needed a set of rules, I mean, these three would be a good place to start because there is such an imbalance of power in the relationship. Michael, you had a thought. Go ahead.
I did. I just wanted to close my own comment out with, I I get really excited. I was really excited when I joined SRAP because SRAP was passionate about building a better food system. Um, and the only way to build a better food system in the environment and in the culture that we're in is giving back some power to the farmers. Everyone can get behind supporting rules that aim at supporting the farm while holding these corporations and companies accountable to the farms that they're in contract with. Um, Everybody can get behind that. That's a baby step. So Patty, I hope these rules stand strong. And if they don't, I hope we built a bridge with the farmers and with the advocates for a better food system to join hands and let's support these guys so that we can give one final push and see these rules stand.
And really got to get a shout out to Patty and being a conduit to what's happening in DC and also the campaign for contract agriculture reform. A gentleman named Steve Etka, who's worked with us for many, many years, who's very instrumental in getting these rules across the goal line. So I'm just going to close here. When we talk about changes and being an agent of change, you have to work from an assumption. I wrote down the assumption that we at Growers Unite we work from, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget anything. And then we work from the assumption that every farmer who works hard should have a fair chance to make a living. Today, too many farmers are being squeezed by rising cost in a marketplace where they have little bargaining power. That affects not just farmers, but the communities that depend on them. We can change that by giving farmers a stronger collective voice and demanding a fair marketplace. The first step is getting farmers together and listening to what we need. That's where we come in. And in honor of Dolly Parton, I just want to leave with a thing that she said that I've heard her say it 2 or 3 times, and it really resonates for today. It's like when you can't change the wind, you adjust the sails. So we want to adjust the sails, and I just will open the floor, Hannah, to if you got any questions in the chat or I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, thank you all. Feel free to shower our chat with praises for our speakers. I know they worked hard to kind of distill some of this tough language and industry jargon. So hopefully we're breaking it down in a way that's more accessible to everybody. I haven't seen many questions in the chat. I think folks are feeling a little shy. Maybe we're just feeling a little sad because Dolly did pass recently. But we did get a few questions and curiosities in the registration form. So one of them, Craig, maybe you want to go over. We had this question about, like why would the USDA strike down these rules? Doesn't it show that they're in cahoots with organizations like the political figures are in cahoots with big packers? Aren't they revealing their hand by doing this?
Well, I'm not going to sit there and pretend that these large companies don't have political influence. Patty, you want to chime in here?
I think that's a reasonable question. And it is feeling particularly, what is that? Cognitive dissonance, right? Or gaslighting. When you watch every speech, every press release, every message out of USDA right now is about consolidation, right? And breaking up big meat packers and restoring, like breaking it down. So what we need to do, as advocates and folks involved in this industry is point out if their actions are not meeting that. So I will say, I do not know how this ends. We are going to fight like hell. We're going to try to keep these rules alive. We've been trying to get these rules across the finish line for a very long time, and it does feel different this time than previous attacks. So that is not a guarantee we're going to win, but we have some wind in our sails that we have not had in the past. Kind of people, I think more people understand how unfair the system is and why we need these rules. I think there's a better level of understanding in general. I think, and we have a few kind of points to point at about what we have going for us. And one is if you're tuned in to kind of farm politics, there's a lot of divisions of like, this group is always here, this group is always here. There's an association for the companies here. And, we have the American Farm Bureau Federation and the National Farmers Union together on press statements. That doesn't happen a lot. It's not impossible, but it's rare, saying these rules need to stay into effect. These are the two biggest, broad line general farm membership organizations in the country saying we need these rules to be finished. Historically, they sometimes break on different sides of the partisan divide. So like that is something we have had interest from some Republican offices who maybe aren't usually going to be critical of a Republican administration. I don't know if that's enough, but in previous rounds of this, we didn't have that. So it's a great question. It does beg the question of who they're working for, which then we have to lean into and really like draw out that contradiction and try to kind of, shame them into not actually following through on this plan.
Perfect. Thank you, Patty.
Okay, we did get another question kind of along the same lines. This one came in through a registration. Is it time to unionize?
That's tricky. The way it was explained to me was if you are an independent contractor, you cannot unionize. There is it's like an antitrust kind of thing where that you can be accused of trying to manipulate something. Like if a bunch of independent contractors walk in and say, "Hey, we want 10 cents a pound," or we're walking. There's some issues with that. We met with, I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, he was a union guy, and he kind of advised us on that. But we can still form associations and have a collective voice that way. Union, don't think so.
Thank you. And last question that we had was about Growers Unite, actually. So if you can talk more about the program, maybe. Someone was curious about when they reach out to the team, is their information kept confidential? How is that treated?
Yes, I mean that we're all former contract growers, so we certainly get the subtleties of it. We understand there's not some growers don't desire to be out front on the list. So absolutely the database that I have of growers, somebody would have to kill me to get to it.
We won't let that happen, but thank you, Craig. Those were the questions. Okay, so I will go ahead and just spotlight myself. Hey everyone, it's me again. I just wanted to share this. I think that's a wrap mostly, but I just wanted to go ahead and share some contact information and next steps. So thank you again for joining us. I know this was an hour out of everyone's evening or afternoon. It really means a lot that you chose to spend your time listening to us all. And if you would like to stay in the loop, feel free to check out our website. I can drop the links in the chat again. It is growersunite.org. And if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, receive action alerts and other updates about what's going on, as Patty said, it's going to be really important to stay in the loop and stay ready to move. You can go to growersunite.org/contact. And of course, you can also follow us on our Facebook page. We will be posting this recording probably to YouTube and then sharing smaller clips on the Facebook page. But that is all from us. So thank you again. I hope everyone has a safe evening.
Thank you all. Thanks, Hannah.
Bye-bye.